The gunshot cracked through the desert air like thunder, and Tabitha Lawrence felt the searing pain tear through her shoulder before her mind could even register what had happened, sending her stumbling forward into the dusty streets of Independence, California, as the late afternoon sun of 1878 beat down mercilessly upon her back. She had been running for 3 days straight, ever since she witnessed Samuel Crane and his gang murder the stagecoach driver outside of Lone Pine. They had seen her watching from behind the rocks, her horse spooked and fled, and she had been running on foot ever since through the unforgiving terrain of the Owens Valley. Her lungs burned with exhaustion, her feet bleeding through her worn boots, and now blood was spreading across her dress like spilled wine. The world tilted sideways as her legs gave out beneath her. She could hear their horses thundering closer, could hear Crane's voice shouting orders to his men. This was it. After surviving 3 days in the wilderness, drinking from streams and hiding in caves, she was going to die in the street like a dog. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. "I've got you," a deep voice said, and she found herself looking up into the most striking pair of gray eyes she had ever seen. The man holding her had dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. He could not have been more than 25, perhaps a year or two older than her own 23 years. "They are coming," she gasped, clutching at his shirt. "They are going to kill me." "Not while I am breathing," he said, his voice steady and calm despite the chaos erupting around them. He lifted her effortlessly and carried her toward the nearest building, kicking open the door to the general store. "Get down!" He set her behind the counter just as the first of Crane's men burst through the door. The cowboy who had saved her drew his revolver with practiced ease and fired once, twice. The outlaw went down. 2 more came through the door, and the cowboy dropped behind the counter beside her, reloading with movements so swift and efficient it was clear he had done this 1,000 times before. "How many?" he asked, pressing his hand firmly against her bleeding shoulder. The pressure hurt, but she could feel the bleeding starting to slow. 4 more, she managed through gritted teeth. "Plus Crane, he is the worst of them." "Name is Nathan Brennan," he said, tearing a strip of fabric from his shirt with his teeth while keeping his other hand pressed against her wound. "I am going to get you out of this, miss. What is your name?" "Tabitha Lawrence," she said, watching his hands work. They were calloused and strong but surprisingly gentle as he bound her shoulder tightly. "I saw them kill a man. They have been hunting me for days." "That explains why you look half dead," Nathan said, but there was no judgment in his voice, only concern. "When was the last time you ate?" 2 days ago. Some berries." He cursed under his breath and grabbed a canteen from his belt, holding it to her lips. "Drink slowly. We are going to have to move fast in a minute." The water was the most beautiful thing she had ever tasted. As she drank, she studied him more closely. He wore dusty brown pants, a blue shirt now partially torn where he had ripped fabric for her bandage, and a worn leather vest. His gun belt sat low on his hips, and he wore it like it was part of him. This was a man who knew violence, but the gentleness in his touch suggested he knew kindness too. "Brennan," a voice shouted from outside. "Send out the girl and we will let you live." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Samuel Crane, you know him, know of him. He has a bounty on his head in 3 territories. Murdered a family in Nevada last year, robbed a bank in Carson City, and shot a deputy in Bishop." Nathan checked his ammunition, his face grim. "He does not leave witnesses." "That is why I have been running," Tabitha said, trying to push herself up. The room spun and Nathan steadied her with a hand on her good shoulder. "You are not running anywhere with that shoulder," he said firmly. "Can you shoot?" "My father taught me," she said. "Before he died last year, Nathan handed her a second revolver from his belt. 6 shots. Make them count if anyone gets past me. What are you going to do? Something stupid, probably, he said, and despite everything, she saw a hint of a smile touch his lips. But I have never been good at letting murderers have their way. He stood suddenly, moving to the broken window. Crane. You want her. You are going to have to come through me. And I promise you, that is not going to be as easy as you think. Gunfire erupted immediately. Nathan dropped back down as bullets shattered what remained of the window. Glass rained down around them. Tabitha clutched the revolver, her heart hammering in her chest. She had seen death up close these past few days, had been certain she was going to die, but somehow the presence of this stranger made her want to fight, want to live. There is a back door, the store owner called from where he was hiding behind a shelf of canned goods. Through the storage room. Nathan looked at Tabitha, then at the door, calculating. Can you walk? I can try. Good enough. He fired 3 quick shots through the window to keep the outlaws back, then pulled her to her feet. The world swayed, but she forced herself to stay upright. They moved through the store, Nathan supporting her weight, until they reached the storage room. The back door opened onto an alley that ran behind the main street. My horse is at the livery, Nathan said, scanning the alley. We get there. We can outrun them. They moved as quickly as Tabitha's wounded body would allow. Each step sent pain shooting through her shoulder, but Nathan's arm around her waist kept her steady. They could hear Crane's men shouting, trying to figure out where they had gone. The livery stable was only 50 yards away, but it might as well have been a mile. They almost made it. Crane himself stepped out from behind a water trough, his gun already drawn and pointed at Nathan's chest. He was a tall man with a cruel face and cold eyes that held no mercy. End of the line, Cowboy. Nathan pushed Tabitha behind him, his own gun coming up. For a moment, the 3 of them stood frozen in a tableau of violence about to unfold. Then a shot rang out, but it did not come from any of them. Crane stumbled, blood blooming on his shoulder. Standing at the end of the alley was the sheriff, a gray-haired man with a badge that glinted in the sunlight, his rifle still smoking. Drop it, Crane. What happened next happened fast. Crane spun, firing at the sheriff. Nathan fired at Crane. Tabitha dropped to her knees as bullets flew over her head. When the gun smoke cleared, Crane was on the ground, Nathan standing over him with his gun still trained on the outlaw's chest. The sheriff was limping but alive, and the other members of Crane's gang were being rounded up by townsfolk who had finally found their courage. You got him, the sheriff said, moving closer. I have been tracking this bastard for 6 months. She is the one who needs help, Nathan said, holstering his gun and immediately turning back to Tabitha. She has been shot. She needs a doctor. The world was starting to fade at the edges, Tabitha realized. The adrenaline that had kept her going was wearing off, and the pain in her shoulder was becoming overwhelming. She felt Nathan lift her again, heard him talking to the sheriff, but the words seemed to come from very far away. When she opened her eyes again, she was lying in a soft bed in a room she did not recognize. Late afternoon, light streamed through lace curtains, and she could hear the sounds of the town outside. Her shoulder throbbed with a deep ache, but when she moved her hand to touch it, she found it properly bandaged. Easy now, a woman's voice said. An older woman with kind eyes and silver hair appeared beside the bed. You are at Doc Morrison's place. You have been asleep for almost a full day. Nathan, Tabitha said, trying to sit up. The cowboy who saved me, is he? He is fine. Been sitting in that chair most of the night watching over you. I finally convinced him to go get some food and rest about an hour ago. The woman smiled. That is quite a man you have got there. He is not mine, Tabitha said, but she felt her cheeks flush. He is just someone who helped me. Hum, the woman said with a knowing look. I have been a nurse for 30 years, dear. I know how a man looks at a woman he cares for. That boy did not leave your side except when Doc was working on your shoulder. Tabitha did not know what to say to that. She barely knew Nathan Brennan. He had caught her fall, stopped her bleeding, and saved her life, but they were strangers. Yet when she closed her eyes, she could still feel the strength of his arms around her, could still hear the steady calm in his voice when everything was chaos. The door opened and Nathan walked in, stopping short when he saw she was awake. Tabitha. Just the way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. You saved my life. You survived 3 days in the desert on your own, he said, moving closer to the bed. I just caught you when you fell. That is not all you did. She looked at him properly now, seeing the exhaustion in his face, the worry that had been etched there. Thank you. He pulled the chair closer and sat down, and the nurse quietly excused herself. For a moment they just looked at each other. In the clear light of the room, Tabitha could see more details. The way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the small scar on his chin, the calloused hands that rested on his knees, hands that had held her so carefully. Doc says you are going to be fine, Nathan said. Bullet went clean through, missed anything vital. You will have a scar, but you will heal. What about Crane? Dead. His men are in jail. The sheriff sent telegrams to 3 different territories. Turns out there were bounties on all of them. Nathan's expression softened. You are safe now. It is over. The relief that washed over Tabitha was so intense she felt tears spring to her eyes. 3 days of terror, 3 days of running and hiding and being certain she was going to die, and it was finally over. The tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Hey, Nathan said gently, reaching out to brush them away with his thumb. You are safe, I promise. I thought I was going to die, she whispered. I thought they were going to catch me and kill me and no one would ever know what happened to me. But they did not. You survived, you fought. His hand lingered on her cheek, warm and solid and real. You are the bravest woman I have ever met. I was terrified the entire time. Bravery is not the absence of fear, Nathan said. It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear. You did that. They stayed like that for a long moment, his hand against her face, her eyes locked on his. Something was happening between them, something Tabitha could not quite name but could feel in every fiber of her being. This man was a stranger, but he did not feel like one. He felt like something she had been searching for without knowing she was looking. Where are you from? She asked, wanting to know everything about him suddenly. What brings you to Independence? Nathan pulled his hand back, but slowly, reluctantly. I am from Wyoming originally. Been drifting for the past few years, taking work where I can find it. Ranch hand, cattle driver, security for wagon trains. I was passing through Independence when I heard the gunshot and saw you falling. Just passing through, Tabitha repeated, trying to ignore the disappointment that settled in her stomach. Of course he was. Men like Nathan Brennan did not stay in one place. They drifted like tumbleweeds, never putting down roots. I was, Nathan said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up. But now I am thinking maybe I should stay a while, see what Independence has to offer. It is a small town, Tabitha said, her heart starting to race. Not much excitement. I have had enough excitement to last me a lifetime, Nathan said with a slight smile. Small and quiet sounds pretty good right now. The nurse came back in then, shooing Nathan out so Tabitha could rest. But as he stood to leave, he paused at the door and looked back at her. I will come by tomorrow, if that is all right with you. I would like that, Tabitha said, and the smile he gave her made her forget all about the pain in her shoulder. Over the next 2 weeks, as Tabitha healed, Nathan came to visit her every single day. At first, the visits were short and proper, with the nurse or Doc Morrison always in the room. But as Tabitha grew stronger and was able to sit up and move around, Nathan started taking her on short walks around the town, supporting her with a gentle hand on her good arm. She learned that he was 26 years old, that his parents had died when he was 18, and he had been on his own ever since. He had tried settling down twice before, but it never took, something always pulling him back to the road. He was good with horses, could track better than most scouts, and had a quiet sense of humor that made her laugh when she least expected it. He learned that she had come to independence a year ago after her father died, trying to make a new start. She worked at the hotel, cleaning rooms and helping in the kitchen. She loved reading, missed her father terribly, and had a stubborn streak a mile wide that had probably saved her life during those 3 days of running. "You should have seen yourself when I caught you," Nathan said one afternoon as they sat on the bench outside the general store. "Blood all over, half dead from exhaustion, and you still managed to tell me they were coming and how many there were. Most people would have just passed out." "I did not want you to be caught by surprise," Tabitha said. The September air was turning cooler, autumn beginning to creep into the valley. Her shoulder was healing well, the stitches had been removed, and she was regaining most of her range of motion. "You were trying to save me. The least I could do was give you information." "You are something else, Tabitha Lawrence," Nathan said, and the way he looked at her made her breath catch. "What?" she asked softly. "I have been trying to figure out how to say this," Nathan said, turning to face her fully. "I know we have not known each other long, just 2 weeks, but I cannot stop thinking about you. Every morning I wake up and the first thing I think about is seeing you. Every night I go to sleep thinking about your smile. I have been drifting for 8 years, never finding a reason to stay anywhere, and then I caught you falling and everything changed." Tabitha's heart was hammering in her chest. "Nathan." "I am not good with words," he continued, "but I know what I feel. I am falling in love with you, Tabitha. Maybe I already have fallen, and I need to know if there is any chance at all, that you might feel the same way." For a moment, Tabitha could not speak. She had been trying so hard not to let herself hope, not to let herself imagine that what she felt might be returned. Nathan Brennan was handsome and strong and brave, and she was just a hotel maid who had gotten herself nearly killed. But the vulnerability in his eyes, the hope mixed with fear, told her that he meant every word. "I started falling in love with you the moment you caught me," she said, her voice trembling. "I just did not let myself believe it could be real." The smile that broke across Nathan's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "It is real. I promise you it is real. You said you have tried to settle down before," Tabitha said, needing to voice her fear. "What if you get restless again? What if you wake up one day and decide you need to move on?" "I do not think you understand," Nathan said, squeezing her hand. "I was not drifting because I loved it. I was drifting because I was looking for something. I just did not know what it was until I found you. You are what I have been searching for, Tabitha. You are home." Tabitha felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were happy tears. She leaned forward and Nathan met her halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "So what happens now?" Tabitha asked. "Now I find myself some steady work," Nathan said. "Put down roots. Court you properly. And somewhere down the line, if you will have me, I would like to marry you." "That is quite a plan," Tabitha said, laughing. "What if I say no?" "Then I will ask you again," Nathan said with a grin. "And I will keep asking until you say yes or tell me to leave town." "I will not tell you to leave town," Tabitha said softly. "I think I would die if you left." "Then I guess I am staying," Nathan said and kissed her again. Nathan found work at the Jameson Ranch just outside of town, working with their horses. He had a gift with them, a patience and understanding that made even the wildest Mustang calm under his hands. Within a month, he had impressed the owner enough to be given a permanent position and a small cabin on the property. He courted Tabitha properly, as he had promised. He would ride into town every Sunday after church, and they would walk together, talking about everything and nothing. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers from the hills, a book of poetry he had bought from the traveling merchant, a beautiful blue ribbon that matched her eyes. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of the hotel where she lived and worked, and he would tell her stories about his travels while she leaned against his shoulder. The town watched their courtship with approval. Everyone knew the story of how Nathan had saved Tabitha's life, had risked his own neck to protect a stranger. That kind of courage and honor was respected in the West, and anyone could see how deeply the two of them cared for each other. The way Nathan looked at Tabitha like she was the most precious thing in the world. The way Tabitha lit up whenever he rode into town. Winter came to the Owens Valley, cold and crisp. Nathan taught Tabitha to shoot properly, not just the basics her father had shown her, but real marksmanship. They would ride out to a secluded spot in the hills and practice, and more often than not they ended up kissing more than shooting. But Tabitha's aim improved regardless. "You are a natural," Nathan said one December afternoon, watching her hit the target dead center 3 times in a row. "Better than me." "I had a good teacher," Tabitha said, lowering the gun. She had filled out in the months since her injury, no longer the half-starved, desperate woman Nathan had caught. Her cheeks had color again, her eyes sparkled with life, and she moved with confidence. The scar on her shoulder was a reminder of what she had survived, but it no longer defined her. "I have been thinking," Nathan said, taking the gun from her and setting it aside. "I know we have only been courting for 3 months. I know that is not very long. But I also know that I love you more than I have ever loved anything, and I do not want to spend another day without knowing you are mine." He dropped to one knee in the dirt, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond that glinted in the winter sunlight. "Tabitha Lawrence, will you marry me?" Tabitha's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, of course yes." Nathan stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and hope and promise into that kiss. They were married in February of 1879 in the small church in Independence. Tabitha wore a simple white dress that she and the other women in town had sewn together, and she carried wildflowers that Nathan had somehow found blooming in a sheltered spot in the hills. Nathan wore his best clothes, his hair neatly combed, looking more nervous than Tabitha had ever seen him. "You look beautiful," he whispered when she reached the altar, and she saw tears in his eyes. "You look pretty handsome yourself, Cowboy," she whispered back, and he laughed. The ceremony was simple but perfect. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Nathan kissed her, the small church erupted in applause. They walked out into the February sunshine as Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, ready to start their life together. Nathan's employer, Mr. Jameson, had given them the cabin as a wedding gift. It was small but sturdy, with a bedroom, a main room with a fireplace, and a little kitchen. Tabitha had spent weeks fixing it up, making curtains, arranging the furniture they had scrounged and bought. It was not much, but it was theirs. Their first night as husband and wife, Nathan carried Tabitha over the threshold and set her down gently in the middle of their home. "Welcome home, Mrs. Brennan." "It is perfect," Tabitha said, looking around at the little cabin that glowed warm in the firelight. "Everything is perfect." Not quite everything, Nathan said, pulling her close. But it is about to be. He kissed her then, and Tabitha kissed him back with all the love and passion she had been holding inside for months. They had been proper in their courtship, never going beyond kisses and embraces, but now they were married and there was nothing holding them back. Nathan lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bedroom, and they lost themselves in each other, discovering the depths of the love they shared. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Nathan worked with the horses, earning a reputation throughout the valley as a man who could gentle any animal. Tabitha took in sewing and helped some of the other ranch families with their children, earning extra money and making friends. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk, or Nathan would read to her from the newspaper while she mended clothes, or they would simply hold each other and marvel at the life they had built. "I never thought I could be this happy," Tabitha said one evening in late spring, nestled against Nathan's chest. "After my father died, after everything that happened with Crane, I thought I had used up all my luck just surviving." "That was not luck," Nathan said, stroking her hair. "That was strength, your strength, and you have not used it up. We have our whole lives ahead of us." "Do you ever regret it?" Tabitha asked, tilting her head to look up at him. "Giving up drifting, settling down?" "Not for one single second," Nathan said firmly. "You are my adventure now, Tabitha. Every day with you is better than any trail I ever rode." In July, Tabitha discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathan over dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. They had not talked much about children, and she was not sure if he was ready. She need not have worried. Nathan's face transformed with joy so pure it took her breath away. He jumped up from the table, pulled her into his arms, and spun her around just like he had when she agreed to marry him. "We are going to have a baby." "Really? Really?" Tabitha said, laughing at his excitement. "In February, the doctor thinks." "A baby," Nathan said, setting her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "Our baby. Tabitha, you have made me the happiest man alive." Nathan became even more protective during the pregnancy, if that was possible. He would not let Tabitha lift anything heavy, insisted she rest every afternoon, and rode into town twice a week to get her whatever she was craving. The other ranch hands teased him mercilessly, but Nathan did not care. His wife and child were the most important things in the world to him. The pregnancy was not easy. Tabitha was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep anything down. In her 6th month, she developed a complication that had the doctor worried, and she was confined to bed rest for several weeks. Nathan barely left her side, working half days so he could be home with her, holding her hand through the worst of it. "I am scared," Tabitha admitted one night, lying in their bed with Nathan curled protectively around her. "What if something goes wrong?" "Nothing is going to go wrong," Nathan said, but she could hear the fear in his voice too. "You are the strongest person I know. You survived being shot and 3 days in the desert. You can survive this." "That was different," Tabitha said. "That was just me. Now there is a baby depending on me." "And that baby is lucky to have you as a mother," Nathan said fiercely. "You are going to be amazing, Tabitha, and I am going to be right here with you through all of it. Whatever happens, we face it together." When February came around again, Tabitha went into labor on a cold, clear night. Nathan rode through the darkness to fetch the doctor and the midwife, then paced outside the bedroom like a caged animal while the women worked. He could hear Tabitha crying out in pain, and it took everything in him not to burst through the door. Mr. Jameson sat with him, offering silent support and occasionally forcing whiskey into Nathan's hand. "She is strong," the older man said. "She will make it through." "She has to," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "I cannot lose her, I cannot." The labor lasted through the night and into the morning. Just when Nathan thought he could not take it anymore, he heard a baby cry, the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. The midwife opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Brennan, a healthy baby boy, and your wife is fine." Tired, but fine. Nathan did not remember crossing the room. Suddenly he was at Tabitha's bedside, and she was looking up at him with exhausted eyes but the most radiant smile. In her arms was a tiny bundle, red-faced and crying, their son. "Meet our boy," Tabitha said softly. "I thought we could name him Thomas after my father." "Thomas Brennan," Nathan said, reaching out with a trembling hand to touch the baby's soft cheek. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." He leaned down and kissed Tabitha gently, tasting the salt of his own tears. "Thank you. Thank you for him, for this life, for everything." "We made it," Tabitha said, tears streaming down her own face. "We really made it, Nathan." "We did," Nathan agreed, carefully taking his son into his arms for the first time. The baby was so tiny, so fragile, and Nathan had never felt more terrified or more full of love in his entire life. "And we are going to give him the best life we can." Thomas was a healthy, happy baby who grew strong and quick. He had his mother's blue eyes and his father's dark hair, and from the moment he could crawl, he was constantly trying to escape whatever room he was in. Tabitha and Nathan had their hands full, but they loved every exhausting minute of it. Nathan proved to be a natural father, patient and loving but firm when he needed to be. He would carry Thomas around the ranch, showing him the horses and the cattle, telling him stories about the mountains and the valley. Tabitha would watch them together and feel her heart swell with so much love she thought it might burst. When Thomas was 2 years old, Tabitha became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was much easier, and in the spring of 1882 they welcomed a daughter they named Sarah. She was tiny and delicate with blonde hair and gray eyes like her father, and Nathan was completely wrapped around her little finger from the first moment. "2 children," Nathan said one evening, holding Sarah while Thomas played at his feet. "How did I get so lucky?" "I think we both got lucky," Tabitha said, sitting beside him and leaning her head on his shoulder. "The day you caught me was the luckiest day of my life." "Mine too," Nathan said, kissing the top of her head. "Mine too." The years passed quickly. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, learning about horses and ranching. Sarah was quieter, more thoughtful, but with a stubborn streak that reminded everyone of her mother. Nathan was promoted to foreman of the Jameson Ranch, and they were able to save enough money to buy their own small piece of land on the edge of the property. "We can build our own house," Nathan said, showing Tabitha the deed. "Something bigger, with room for the children to grow. Maybe even add on to the herd, start our own ranch someday." "Our own ranch," Tabitha said, looking at the paper in wonder. "Nathan, we are really building a life here." "The best life," Nathan agreed, "with the best woman I have ever known." They built the house themselves over the course of a year, with help from the other ranch hands and townspeople. It was a simple 2-story structure, but it was solid and well made, with a big kitchen for Tabitha and a wide porch where they could sit in the evenings. They moved in on Thomas's 6th birthday, and the joy on the children's faces as they explored their new home was worth every hour of labor. In 1885, Tabitha gave birth to their 3rd child, another son they named Daniel. He was a quiet baby, content to watch the world with solemn eyes, and he grew into a thoughtful, gentle boy who loved books as much as his mother did. Life was not without its challenges. There were years when the rain did not come and the grass dried up, years when illness swept through the valley, years when money was tight and they had to scrimp and save. But through all of it, Nathan and Tabitha faced every problem together. their love growing stronger with each challenge overcome. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Tabitha back to the spot where he had proposed, up in the hills overlooking the valley. They left the children with the Jamesons and rode out together, just the two of them. "Remember when I asked you to marry me here?" Nathan said, dismounting and helping Tabitha down. "I was so nervous I thought I might be sick." "I remember," Tabitha said, laughing. "You were shaking so hard I thought you might drop the ring." "I knew you were the one," Nathan said, pulling her close. "I knew it from the moment I caught you, even if it took me a few weeks to admit it to myself. You changed everything for me, Tabitha. You gave me a reason to stop running, a reason to build something real." "You saved my life," Tabitha said, resting her hands on his chest. "And then you made it worth living. I love you so much, Nathan Brennan." "I love you too," Nathan said, and kissed her the way he had on their wedding day, full of promise and hope and forever. They stood there as the sun set over the valley, two people who had found each other in the worst possible moment and built something beautiful from it. Below them, they could see the ranch, their home, the life they had created together. 3 children were waiting for them, along with friends and neighbors and a community they had become part of. "You ever think about that day?" Tabitha asked, still held in Nathan's arms. "When you caught me?" "Every day," Nathan admitted. "I think about how close I came to not being there. If I had left town an hour earlier, if I had been on a different street, if I had not heard the gunshot. But I was there. I did hear it, and I caught you." "Fate," Tabitha said softly. "Maybe," Nathan said. "Or maybe just luck. But whatever it was, I am grateful for it every single day." They watched the stars come out over the valley, wrapped in each other's arms, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From that terrible, violent day to this moment of perfect peace. From strangers to soulmates. From running and drifting to home and forever. Thomas grew up to be a fine horseman like his father, eventually taking over as foreman when Nathan stepped back. Sarah married a schoolteacher who moved to Independence, and they built a house just down the road from Nathan and Tabitha. Daniel went to college in San Francisco to study law, but he came home every summer and never forgot where he came from. Nathan and Tabitha grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They became grandparents and then great-grandparents, watching their family grow and spread across the valley. On summer evenings, they would sit on the porch of the house they had built together, holding hands and watching the sunset, still in love after all these years. "You know what I realized?" Tabitha said one evening when they were both in their 60s, her hair now silver and Nathan's face lined with years of sun and work. "We have been together longer than we were apart. My whole life before you seems like it belonged to someone else." "I know what you mean," Nathan said, squeezing her hand gently. "Sometimes I try to remember what it was like before I met you, and I cannot. It is like my life started the day I caught you falling." "You did more than catch me," Tabitha said, turning to look at him. His hair was gray now, his hands gnarled with arthritis, but to her he was still the strong, brave cowboy who had saved her life. "You caught me and you held on and you never let go." "Never will," Nathan promised, just as he had promised so many years ago. "Not in this life or the next." They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had created, the love that had sustained them through everything. Two people who had found each other in a moment of violence and fear and had chosen each other every day since. The scar on Tabitha's shoulder had faded to a thin white line over the years, barely visible now. But neither of them had forgotten what it represented, the day their lives changed forever. The day they found each other. The day that running from danger led Tabitha straight into the arms of the man who would become her everything. Years continued to pass in the valley. The children they had raised grew into strong, capable adults who carried on the values Nathan and Tabitha had instilled in them. Hard work, honesty, loyalty, and above all, love. The small ranch they had started grew into a thriving operation, known throughout California for the quality of their horses and the integrity of the family that ran it. Nathan eventually had to give up riding after a fall in his 70s left him with a bad hip. But he remained active around the ranch, advising Thomas and helping train the younger horses that did not require as much physical work. Tabitha's eyesight began to fail, so Sarah would come over several times a week to read to her mother, the two of them sitting in the kitchen drinking tea just as Tabitha and her own mother had done so many years ago. But through all the changes that age brought, one thing remained constant, and that was the love between Nathan and Tabitha. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, had survived loss and heartbreak and disappointment, and had celebrated triumphs and joys beyond counting. And through it all, they had held onto each other. "You remember teaching me to shoot?" Tabitha asked one afternoon, the two of them sitting on the porch in their rocking chairs. She was 70 now, Nathan 73, and their children and grandchildren were gathered at the ranch for a big family dinner. "I remember you being a better shot than me within a month," Nathan said with a chuckle. "Nearly shot my hat off once just to prove a point." "You said women could not shoot as well as men," Tabitha reminded him, her eyes twinkling with mischief even after all these years. "I had to prove you wrong." "You have been proving me wrong for 50 years, Nathan said fondly. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Little feet came running up the porch steps, and their great-grandson, a boy of about 5 with Thomas's dark hair and Sarah's gray eyes, climbed into Nathan's lap. "Grandpa Nathan, tell us the story again." "What story is that?" Nathan asked, though he knew perfectly well what the boy wanted to hear. "About how you and Grandma Tabitha met, about the bad men and the shooting and how you saved her." Nathan looked at Tabitha, who smiled and nodded. It was a story they had told countless times over the years, to their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. A story that had become family legend. But they never tired of telling it, because it was their story, the beginning of everything good in their lives. "Well," Nathan began, settling the boy more comfortably in his lap. "It was the summer of 1878, and I was riding through a little town called Independence." As Nathan told the story, other grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered around, some sitting on the porch steps, others leaning against the railing. They all knew the story by heart, but they loved hearing it anyway, loved seeing the way their grandparents looked at each other when Nathan got to the part where he caught Tabitha, the way Tabitha's hand would reach for Nathan's when he described binding her wound. And then what happened? The youngest great-granddaughter asked, even though she knew perfectly well. "Then your great-grandmother looked up at me with those beautiful blue eyes," Nathan said, smiling at Tabitha, "and I knew right then and there that my life had just changed forever. I just did not realize how much." "He saved me," Tabitha added, addressing the children. "But more than that, he chose me. Every single day since then he has chosen me, and I have chosen him. That is what love is, little ones. It is not just the big, dramatic moments, though those matter too. It is choosing each other, day after day, year after year, through good times and bad. And never giving up," Nathan added. "Your great-grandmother and I have been through some hard times. There were years when the ranch barely made enough to feed us. We lost your great-uncle James when he was just a baby, before any of you were born. We have had fights and disagreements and moments when things seemed impossible, but we never gave up on each other. We never will." The children absorbed this wisdom with solemn faces. understanding in the way that children do that they were being told something important, something to carry with them into their own lives. Later, after the family had eaten and the children had been put to bed in various rooms throughout the house, Nathan and Tabitha found themselves alone on the porch again, watching the stars come out over the familiar landscape of the valley. "We have had a good life," Tabitha said softly, her head resting on Nathan's shoulder despite the awkwardness of the rocking chairs. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "The best," Nathan agreed, his arm around her waist. "And you know what? If I had to do it all over again, I would not change a single thing. Every moment, good and bad, led us here. To this porch, this family, this life. I would change one thing," Tabitha said, and Nathan pulled back to look at her in surprise. "I would make sure I told you every single day how much I love you, how grateful I am that you caught me that day, because I do not think I have said it enough. You have shown me every day," Nathan said gently, pulling her close again, "in 1,000 different ways. The way you smile at me across the dinner table, the way you held my hand when we buried James, the way you believed in me when I wanted to expand the ranch and everyone said we could not do it. I have never doubted your love, Tabitha, not for 1 second." "Good," Tabitha said, settling back against him, "because you are stuck with me now, Nathan Brennan, for whatever time we have left." "Forever is not long enough," Nathan said, kissing the top of her head, "but I will take whatever time we are given and I will treasure every moment." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the night. Somewhere in the house, a baby cried and was quickly soothed. The horses moved restlessly in the barn, settling down for the night. A coyote howled in the distant hills, its call answered by another. The same sounds they had heard for 50 years, the soundtrack of their life together. "Nathan," Tabitha said after a while, her voice drowsy. "Yes, love, thank you for catching me." Nathan smiled in the darkness, holding his wife close. "Thank you for letting me." The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Spring brought new foals and the return of green to the valley. Summer burned hot and bright. Autumn painted the cottonwoods gold. Winter wrapped everything in crystalline cold. And through it all, Nathan and Tabitha remained the heart of the family they had created, their love story inspiring the generations that came after them. On a clear morning in late March, when Nathan was 78 and Tabitha was 75, Nathan did not wake up. He died peacefully in his sleep, his hand still holding Tabitha's just as it had every night for more than 50 years. The doctor said his heart simply stopped, worn out after a long life of hard work and deep love. Tabitha was devastated. The man who had caught her, saved her, loved her was gone. Half of her soul had been ripped away, and she did not know how to exist without him. The family gathered around her, offering comfort and support, but nothing could fill the Nathan-shaped hole in her heart. For weeks, she barely spoke, sitting in her rocking chair on the porch and staring at the empty chair beside her. She would not eat unless her children forced her to. She did not want to go on without Nathan. It was Thomas who finally broke through to her. He sat beside her on the porch one evening and took her hand, his own eyes red from crying for the father he had loved so dearly. "Mama," he said gently, "I know you are hurting. We all are, but Papa would not want this. He would want you to live, to enjoy the family you built together, to find some happiness in the years you have left." "I cannot," Tabitha whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know how to be me without him." "You do not have to be you without him," Thomas said. "He is still with you, Mama. In me, in Sarah, in Daniel, in every grandchild and great-grandchild. In this ranch, in this house, in every story we tell about him. He is not gone. He has just changed, and he would want you to honor what you had by living fully until you can be with him again." Tabitha looked at her son, seeing Nathan in the shape of his jaw, in the steadiness of his gaze, in the strength of his hands. Thomas was right. Nathan lived on in all the ways that mattered. Slowly, painfully, Tabitha began to heal. She would never stop missing Nathan, never stop reaching for him in the night only to find the bed empty. But she began to eat again, to smile again, to take joy in her children and grandchildren. She told stories about Nathan, keeping his memory alive, making sure that the generations to come would know what kind of man he had been. She lived for 3 more years, years filled with family and love, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. And when she died in her sleep at the age of 78, the family knew she had gone to be with Nathan at last. They buried her beside him in the little cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch. The whole valley came out for the funeral, paying respects to the woman who had survived so much, who had built such a beautiful family, who had loved so deeply. On her gravestone, beneath her name and dates, Thomas had engraved a simple phrase that captured the essence of her life. She ran from danger and found love. And beside it, on Nathan's stone, he caught her fall and never let go. The ranch continued for generations, the Brennan name becoming synonymous with quality and integrity throughout California. The house Nathan and Tabitha built still stood, lovingly maintained by their descendants. The story of how they met was passed down through the years, each generation adding their own embellishments, but always keeping the core truth intact. That love can come from the most unexpected places. That courage is not about being fearless, but about choosing to act despite fear. That a single moment of kindness, of bravery, can change not just 2 lives but create a legacy that extends through time. That sometimes the best thing you can do is catch someone when they fall, and then hold on with everything you have. And in the hearts of all who knew them or heard their story, Nathan and Tabitha Brennan lived on, their love eternal, their legacy secure, their story a testament to the power of choosing each other, every day in every way, for as long as life allows and beyond.